I'm also the grants administrator here, and I wear a lot of hats, but I love everything that I do. I love my church, and it's been a great, great experience. I've been here since 2005, and I've worked in a lot of different capacities, but no matter how far away from the finances and the grants that I still get kind of pulled in. Um, I'm not that loud, so if you guys need to move up, please feel free to do so. I think they started the clock. So, in case you didn't hear, there's a lot of information in here. We won't get to go through it all, but you use this as a point of reference when you're starting to look for grants or when you're starting to work on your grant application. So on your yellow sheet, this talks about church finances. How many church finance people do we have in here? Just one? So I'm going to go really high level on this since we only have a couple. And then if you have any questions, then you can see me. But we'll spend the bulk of our time talking about the grants because I'm sure that's what most of the people are in here for. So with the church finances, it's just important that you have a budget, that you plan, and that you follow your budget. Make sure that you have policies and procedures in place. And communicate those policies and procedures with your staff. Sometimes when things are not clear, then that's when you end up having a lot of issues. One of the things that I shared with the group earlier is that a lot of times people don't understand, or congregants don't understand, that the income that the church receives is from the kindness of our parishioners, which is our tithes and offering. So if people are on vacation, they generally don't tithe. She's like, yeah. Well, yeah, generally if people, and then they don't make it up. So you may have a Sunday where you might get $5,000 because people are out. And then if you have a ministry that was planning a field trip, or they were planning to do a brunch, or planning to do anything, or just needed supplies, a lot of times if it's not communicated what the policies are, they can get really frustrated when they don't understand that, well, this Sunday all we took in was $5,000 and the mortgage is due this week. So if you have a policy in place that all check requests have to be in 2 weeks in advance, 3 weeks in advance, 2 days in advance, it just depends on what you as your ministry will need, then you can work through it. You can allocate monies from other places, and then get them what they need in a timely manner for them to be able to operate their particular department or their particular ministry. So just make sure that you have policies and procedures and follow the policies and procedures. Don't do for one that you're not going to do for the other, because then that's going to cause confusion. Well, I thought you said we didn't have the money for us to do what we wanted to do. Now, unless it's something important, then you may, but I wouldn't make a habit of doing it. A CPA. Hiring a CPA can be very, very beneficial. Of course, if you don't have the income to do that, then just make sure that you are consulting with someone and making sure that the way that you're capturing your finances, the way that you're doing your expenditures is the correct way to do it. It helps with structure. It gives you another set of eyes to make sure that you are doing things correctly. And it helps with audits if you're in a situation where you ever have to be audited, or if you have to complete an audit. Taxes, very important. Even though churches are tax exempt, they're only tax exempt from income, but you're not tax exempt from payroll taxes. And I think we've seen over time how a lot of churches can get in trouble because we don't always pay things on time. All right. So just make sure that you're staying on top of those things. 501c. How many of you have a 501c3? Okay. All right. Is your 501c tied to your church ministry or is it separate? How many is tied to your church ministry?
When you say tied to church ministry, what do you mean? Like,
So Victorious Praise Fellowship is our church.
right.
We have, but we don't have a 501c3 for our
Church
church.
itself.
Right. But we have Victorious Community Development Corporation, and we have a 501c3 for that, which is where we do all of our outreach stuff. The only thing that filters through Victorious Praise is church. Everything else filters outside. So our daycare, our after school, our food pantry, clothes closet, and all of those other things filters through. Okay. It's whatever you prefer, but what I suggest is that you keep them separate. Okay? It's just easier if the government should come in and say, I want to audit your church books. Then all they're auditing is your church books. They're not auditing all of your other stuff. Not that you're doing anything wrong, but the less the government is in your business, the better off you are. Because then they go asking a whole lot of questions. Well, what was that money for? And this and that. And so it just, yes.
So if you don't have external operations going on other than just the church, are you saying the 501c should be a separate entity in and of itself?
If you're not doing anything else outside of just regular church ministry, then no, you don't. You don't. So if you're not doing anything else outside of church ministry, what would be a reason for you to have a 501c3?
Because everything you're trying to do, the first thing you hear is, are you a 501c?
Okay.
Every time, you know, if you're trying, everybody does something other than church service.
Okay.
You know, we have external events going on, but it's all tied into the church's bankroll.
Right.
But anytime we try to look at grants or funding,
They ask you.
the first thing they ask is, are you 501c?
Okay.
So if we were going to be a 501c, unless I learned something different today, and I'm already seeing that's happening, the 501c status should not simply be for the church alone, or maybe for some of the other things
Yes.
we're doing.
Yes. For some of the other things that you are doing.
Gotcha.
Now, if you already have a 501c3 with your church, I'm not saying to dismantle it. I'm just saying that as you start to do more things that are for a nonprofit organization, I would suggest that you have a separate entity for that.
I think you answered kind of my question. I just didn't know how to quite ask it. So, like, for example, we have a separate 501c3. So we have the church and we have people that care where we funnel, like you said, everything through that. So my question is on the angle of, for example, my husband and I and a few other students, we have an auxiliary called Life After Death, right? And that auxiliary, or that, there's a lot more activity going on in the sense of just, and I foresee funding coming in, and I know there are grants available because I've identified some. So I guess I'm just asking, it's not that, I just don't know if it would benefit the ministry of Life After Death to look into a 501c3 separate, because there's a lot of stuff happening there, and I'm certainly having the conversation with my pastor what his thoughts are too. But what's your advice on that?
I would say if it's something that you're going to continue doing and it's going to be confusing for someone outside of your ministry to understand what it is that you're doing,
I think that's where I am right now, because there's,
Yeah.
I think that's kind of where I'm at right
then
now.
I would suggest that you do. It doesn't hurt. You can have as many 501c3s as you want to. There's no limit on it. Now, what you do run into when you start having a bunch is that you still have to have your board of directors, and you have to have, all of those things. So you just have to understand what your capacity is for that.
And how would that feed into the main church?
It should not.
Okay. So in a situation like that, the funds that you are generating from that auxiliary or fund, even though it had its genesis in the church, those funds have to stay separate from the church.
Because you're accountable to the 501c.
Now, there are ways for the church to still recruit funds from that particular program. So even though our after-school program and our daycare are under our 501c3, we pay rent to the church. Okay? We rent the church's vans. We rent space here. So we pay rent to the church for that. There's nothing wrong with that. All right? Because we're using the facility. If we didn't have the church building to use, we'd have to pay somebody else. So there are ways to recoup some of those funds from that. Okay?
What about the marketing into the offices of the church?
So, if you've ever seen any of our stuff, Victoria's Praise is on everything that we do, as even from a daycare standpoint or from an after-school standpoint, because we say in conjunction with Victoria's Praise Fellowship. But because Victoria's is in both names, in this community, they are synonymous. I mean, people don't even know what Victoria's Community Development Corporation is. They just know, oh, Victoria's Praise. That's the first thing that they say. So you can market it using your church if that's what's most familiar to the people in your community, and then it's in conjunction with or a program under. So marketing, I don't think is an issue. All right. Okay. So any other questions about the church finance piece? All right. So let's go into, before my assistant back there sends me a thing saying, you got 5 minutes. And so I'm just gonna I tell you what we're gonna do this time. I'm gonna hit on a few quick things, and then I'm going to just open it up for questions. Okay, is that all right with everybody? Because you have this and you can just read it. You know, I won't be with you when you go home, so you won't be able to pick my brain and ask me any questions. All right. So, oh, absolutely. I can be reached here at the church. I'm here Monday through Sunday, 7 to 7. I try to not be here on Saturday, but sometimes that doesn't always work out. But as I said, I'm the director of the daycare, as well as I handle the church finances, as well as I handle the finances for our after-school program. So I'm here. You'll find me here. So the number here, 919-957-7500. All right. So do we have any experienced grant writers in the room? Great. Any reviewers? Anybody's been on a review board for any? A director of a grant-funded project? All right. And staff of a grant-funded project? All right. So I have a lot of novices in the room. No problem. The first thing that you should do whenever you are considering writing a grant is to do an organizational readiness assessment. Is your organization willing and able? Do you have the resources to do it? The example I used earlier is there's a grant out there, you want to feed seniors. In your community, you find that the seniors in your community are not getting nutritious hot meals. You're passionate about it, and you just want to make sure that they eat. All right? There's a grant, and you're just so excited. Oh, I'm going to feed 500 seniors. You don't even have 500 seniors in your community. So that's not even realistic. So make sure that you have the capacity to do what it is that you want done. All right? We all have grandiose ideas of what we want to do because we're very passionate people. We want to help everybody. But when you are writing a grant, make sure that it is realistic and that you can carry out the obligations of that grant. Because if someone gives you money, they're going to be expecting results. Right? Nobody's just going to say, oh, here's $1 million, just go out there, do whatever you want to do. When you find that person, please call me. All right? We have what the 21st Century Community Learning Centers grant. That grant is $1.2 million over 3 years. So we get $400,000 a year. In return for that money, not only do we provide services for 160 kids, we fill out this much paperwork every year. Okay? So we can't go to them and say, oh, we've taken your money. We don't have time to fill out those forms. I mean, that's just too much. And that has happened. Don't take people's money if you cannot fulfill the obligation of what it is that they're asking you to do. All right? When you start to think about what it is that you want to do, start getting organized. Don't wait until you actually find a grant for it. So these are some things that you can do when you're starting to envision what your project is. Does anybody have a project that they're looking for funding for now? Okay, what's your project?
After school program.
After school program. All right. So, do you have an after school program now?
I do not.
You do not. Okay. What are you doing to get ready? I'm putting you on the spot. I'm sorry.
No, you're fine.
But you're a church member, so it's
we,
okay.
Yeah, no, so we do typically monthly events with the children at the apartment community that I manage. We have a space where they're for the facility, but just trying to figure out like qualified teachers. We partner with the school systems as well, like they've done some, little information with the families.
Okay. So, you have an after school program. You just don't have the money for it. You have to start somewhere. People want to know that you're doing something before they give you their money. Start somewhere. I have a friend who was in Atlanta, and she just started doing a homework assistance in the evening, providing homework assistance for children. She had about 20 kids, and it was herself, her husband, and another friend of theirs. They now have a facility where they serve over 300 kids every year because of the 21st Century Community Learning Centers grant. But she had to have the data to show. She started with 20, now she's up to 300 over multiple sites. All right, so start somewhere, do something. My good friend Miss Wanda back here used to feed the homeless, and she just started putting bags together, going to the park. Hey, who needs something to eat? Even though she didn't have a grant, she continued to do the work, and other people started to sow into her. The pandemic came, so that kind of shut everything down. However, we're going to be working on something so that she can get that back up and running. She's been on me like for months now, but we're going to get there. So you have to start somewhere. And when we get ready to start, we're going to have data because she had done this for 12 years. So we have 12 years of data. She has served X amount of people. These people have sponsored her. So she has the resources. She has the ability. She has the passion. When you are doing your grant application, tell your story. Okay? You have to picture it or put it in a picture or paint a picture where people can see your heart and your passion for what it is that you want to do. Now, I'm not gonna, with this next statement, I pray I'm not gonna offend anybody. If you are in it for the money, don't do it. because it's not going to be worth it. All of the rigmarole, as my grandma used to say, and all of the hoops that you're going to have to jump through, unless you love what you're going to do, it's not going to be worth it. Yes.
Question, and I don't wanna start a whole nother train of thought.
Okay.
When it comes down to grants and funding, is there such a thing as grants and funding for nonprofits versus 501(c)(3), nonprofits that are not 501(c)(3)?
So it used to be, especially with the federal government, everybody wanted you to have a 501(c)(3). So now you do understand with the 501(c)(3), that just exempts you from the income taxes. You can be a nonprofit and have to pay income taxes, okay? That 501(c) determination is what keeps you from paying taxes on the income that you receive from your funder, okay? So if I leave nothing else with you, please understand that. So back to your question, grant funders do want to see 501(c)(3)s. They're moving away from it now because even with this particular Community Learning Centers grant, for-profit organizations can receive this funding. But for them, it's income, and they have to pay the taxes on it. The nonprofit means that even if you make a profit, it just goes back and you're recycling. When you are a for-profit company, at the end of the year, let's just say you have $50,000 left over. You can do with that $50,000 whatever you want to. You can give it to your shareholders, you can write yourself a check with your CPA before you do that. But with a nonprofit, you have that $50,000, and that money has to be recycled back into your organization. You can't just do with that money what you want. And I think that's sometimes is where nonprofits get into a little bit of trouble. All right, that was a great question. And because that was a great question, this is my shameless plug here. My good friend, Marshetta Parker. Don't know if you've heard of her, but she's a national recording artist. She can be heard on Kirk Franklin's Praise, if you listen to that. And also she can be heard on 103.9 The Light. So she has a new CD out. Listen and enjoy. She is actually our praise team leader here.
I know her well.
Okay, so
I know
she's
her
our
well.
praise team leader here at the church. She's actually at a funeral sharing her gift. And so, or she would have been here today as well. All right. So we're not, we're gonna just leave that. Let's have a Q&A. What's on your mind? Yes.
Do you teach grant courses outside
I do. So I work on the premise of, and I hope I'm gonna get this right. Give a man a fish, he'll eat for a day. Teach a man to fish, he'll eat for a lifetime. That's my rendition. All right. So I will help you with your grant. I will not do your grant for you. I will not do your research because, as I mentioned earlier, from 7 to 7, where am I? I'm here. And this is my first heart. This is my first loyalty. But I don't mind helping. Okay? I share it with the other group. I have probably written grants or helped and assist with grants for maybe 10 or 15 organizations around the country. So, and I have received probably over $25 million in funding for these organizations. It's very time consuming. The research alone is time consuming because when you're painting your picture, you want to make sure that you are including the most relevant information, but also that you're showing them that you've done your due diligence. You didn't just wake up one day and say, oh, I'm gonna write a grant for this. Okay, it takes time, and you want to make sure that you're including everything that you keep within that. So I will help. I had a young lady ask me, she says, do you do shadowing? And I thought she meant, do I do shadowing with, for the grants? She meant, can she come with me to work one day? I said you could, but you'd be very confused at the end of the day. I said, because I may have to be in a classroom, I might have to plunge a toilet, might have to take out some trash, but hey, feel free. I mean, it's ministry. And everybody in here knows that if you do true ministry, that don't always mean that you're in the pulpit. Most of the time, 99.9% of the time, you're not in the pulpit. You know, you're out here with the people. Yes. So I Google everything because there's so much information out there, and unless you're on somebody's listserv, then it's hard to know what's out there and what's available. But what I will say is get on as many listservs as you can. Find out foundations that are out there. I mean, and then there are foundations that that fund some of the craziest stuff. I think the craziest thing that I ever heard was there's a foundation that was funding. It had something to do with your ears, but nobody would have ever thought that a foundation would fund something with your ears. Yes, you get on their mailing list. Go knock on people's doors. Go into your local community. So here in Research Triangle Park, there are so many companies here who have departments that do community outreach. And if you paint your picture to where they will fund your project, okay, to where they will fund your project. So I always start with Google, and I just say, if I'm looking for something for the homeless, I'll say grants for the homeless, and then that'll come up. Grants for playground equipment, grants for pews. It's out there. Oh no, be very specific, because if you don't, you're gonna come up with a whole lot of stuff. All right? Yes. Grants you do not have to pay back. No. Yes.
What is the best industry standard for market and data research outside of just Google?
You can.
So when I'm writing the grants and telling the real facts outside of what I'm already doing, but statistically,
Your local government will have statistics for your community. If you want to know what the homelessness rate is, if that's what you're doing, you want to know what the pregnancy rates are, then you can also get this information from the federal government website. So, the U.S. Census is really a great resource as well. Anybody else? Because my assistant is saying I don't have no more time, and other people are wrapping up. Yes,
Do you assist with 501c?
I do. And the 501c3 application. You guys, let me tell you, don't pay somebody to do that for you. You can do that application yourself, especially if you're just starting out. They don't require a lot of information because you don't have it.
Right.
Do that. Don't pay somebody thousands of dollars to write a 501c3 application for you. You have everything within your organization that you need to fill out that application.
Just need to call you, right?
You can call me if you run into a problem. No, honestly, if you run into a problem when you're doing it, please call me. Same thing with a grant writer. Whether you pay a grant writer or not is going to be up to you. Just make sure you understand what that person has written and that you're able to carry that out. All right? I'll be around.